Good morning again, all, and welcome to MARO's web-based safety training program, Access Safety. This is a training project that is funded in part through a partnership that we have with the Consultation Education and Training Division of MIOSHA, and we're very grateful for that long-standing partnership, and it's valued by our members. We're also fortunate this morning to have with us a representative from the SET division, Kristen Osterkamp, who's a senior industrial hygienist with MIOSHA's SET division and has been with the agency since 2006. Kristen currently provides industrial hygiene-related services to the Southeast Michigan area and has over 16 years of experience as an IH and safety professional. She's a certified industrial hygienist, a certified safety professional, and has a master's in public health degree from the University of Michigan. Go Blue. And we're delighted to have her with us this morning. Welcome, Kristen.
Good morning. Thank you.
Our topic this morning is ergonomics. And for our objectives with the training, we'll go through a definition of the topic and how it applies in the workplace. Identify some of the risk factors or conditions that can lead to injuries related to ergonomics, and then discuss a few types of those injuries. Our focus this morning will be on prevention. That's the goal of ergonomics, is to prevent injuries in the workplace, and we'll have some time as we conclude for questions and comments. So to begin with a definition, a kind of a subtitle or a soundbite for ergonomics is fitting jobs to people. Represents kind of a change in the way that we look at doing work that's occurred really over the last 25 years or so. Prior to that point, particularly in the manufacturing sector, jobs were set up or designed around either the product that was being made or the process that was being used to make it. And an individual or a worker had to fit themselves into that process. And if they couldn't do that without difficulty or without experiencing discomfort, then quite often that person was fit right out the door. That was the kind of old school attitude, particularly in industrial or manufacturing environments. And ergonomics is about a different way of approaching work in general. It's the practice of designing or at times modifying jobs or even the entire workplace, some of its components, the equipment, the methods that are being used, the tools that are being deployed to match the capabilities of the worker. So in that sense, we are fitting or designing the job to that person. And the goal or the objective is, as I mentioned, to prevent injuries. Many of the topics that we discuss both in this training project and throughout workplace safety are have a regulatory basis. They're based in a standard that's enforced here in Michigan by MIOSHA. That's currently not the case with ergonomics. And I've asked Kristen to give us a little bit of a background on that. So Kristen, could you take it from here for a few minutes?
Yes. As Todd mentioned and says on the slide here is that, there really is no MIOSHA ergonomic standard currently in Michigan. There was one proposed, but following through on the promise that Governor Rick Snyder made, basically that once he got into office, that bill was withdrawn, and Bill S-20 there, basically it says that MIOSHA, we can issue guidance. We could issue guidance, but we cannot issue a regulation. So we do have best practice information we can put out there, but at this point you're not going to be seeing an ergonomics regulation proposed for the state of Michigan. And federal OSHA does not have an ergonomic standard. California, a state-run program, is the only state that does. We do have an enforcement instruction on our website. It's actually 27 pages long. And it gives guidance to our enforcement people out in the field as to, when should they look a little bit further into a company's, injury and illness rates, and to really investigate further if there's some ergonomics concerns. And if there would be, the only way to issue any kind of violation would be under the general duty clause, and that's a little harder to make such a violation stick since there is no regulation. So as far as ergonomic recommendations, all employees should be given ergonomic awareness training that covers all the following. First off is ergonomic occupational risk factors. We have to know what elements of our job could put us at risk for getting a sprain, a strain, or a repetitive motion type injury. Also, we want to train employees on the signs and symptoms, like warning signs to indicate that there might be a hazard, that maybe they should adjust their posture or look at taking breaks or something to mitigate these early warning signs before an injury results. Also, we have to let the employees know about, a process of reporting these types of hazards, to bring it to whose attention and to have something in-house as to what do we do, what is the process for assessing and responding to these concerns that employees raise, and how are we going to deal with ergonomic risk factors. Of course, we definitely want to have employee involvement and help get their opinion and get their buy-in as to how can we eliminate these hazards or control or reduce their exposure to these risk factors, of course, where economically and technically feasible. So when we talk about risk factors, why do people get hurt? Really, when I think of risk factors, the big three are high repetition rate, jobs with high repetition, excessive force, and the next big one is awkward postures, which is on the following slide, a little bit more detail. So those are the big three, really. And in addition to those, we have other risk factors such as extremes in temperature. So if we have a lot of cold weather, that we're working in cold weather conditions, our hands, we have less dexterity. As any of us know, when we try to put our key into our front door lock in the winter, we drop our keys, we have a hard time grabbing those keys. Vibrations, another risk factor. Direct pressure, such as to the palm, like if you're using your palm as a tool, you're trying to smack a part into position and you're using your palm as a hammer, just say impact force, the contact stress on the palm is a risk factor. And using pinch grips as opposed to a power grip is not a position that we'd want to have people working in for an extended period of time. Additionally, what plays into, okay, yes, maybe we have poor posture, high repetition, and excessive force, but then we have to also look at the duration. Okay. How long is someone exposed to these risk factors? Is it 1 hour a day? Is it all day? So, of course, the longer the duration that they're exposed, the greater the likelihood that something's going to happen. Also, the level of conditioning that worker has, their physical fitness level. Not everybody is an athlete out there, and so that can put them into greater risk of an injury, basically. Capacity for recovery. Is this machine-paced work, or can the employee take breaks? Because if they can take breaks, of course, that gives them a chance to shake out any numbness, tingling, gives them some relief so that their body can rest before they commence work again. Where if they have machine-paced work, then they're kind of at the mercy of the speed of the line. Poor posture. We see this a lot, too, even in office environments where people are sitting at their desks typing for hours on end, and, they're not sitting right, they are hunched over. And so these when they put their body into poor posture positions, this can increase the likelihood of a problem resulting. And bad body mechanics. So, we have to look at, do we have to bend repetitively, reach into a tote to get parts off from floor level? Maybe it makes more sense to just put that bin a little bit higher off the ground, to help reduce the, the amount of bending that's necessary or excessive reaches, things like that.
Great, thank you, Kristen. The last two risk factors on posture and body mechanics are purposefully capitalized. That's a very big part of a successful ergonomics program, is addressing those issues. Posture is the position that our body's in when we're not moving, and body mechanics is the position that we're in when we are moving. And if we refine that discussion a little bit and look at the muscle groups or target areas that can be at risk of injury, it's a broad range, and certainly all the upper extremities associated especially with repetitive motion, hands, wrists, elbows, and shoulders, but also the neck and lower back. And if you are connected to the computer, in the next few slides we'll demonstrate some examples of positions that are preferred and those to avoid. When we talk about posture and body mechanics and ergonomics, we encourage folks to work as much as possible in a natural or neutral position. And with the wrist, that means in general, it's a natural extension of the forearm, as it would be when you're shaking hands with someone else. So the preferred posture you see on the right is that more natural extension. Ones to avoid are those that involve strong deviations, actually in any direction, whether that's up or down or from side to side, as you see on the slides. We also like to avoid having the palms directly face upward. That in itself can stress the muscles in the wrist and the forearm. So again, as more of a natural extension, neutral position, palms facing each other with hands perpendicular to the work surface. When we're looking at elbows, a general easy red flag to look out for is if an employee is performing a task, especially repetitively, that requires them to keep their elbows out away from their body, not uncommon with packaging or sorting tasks. And the example that you see on the screen there in particular can occur if we're reaching into a box, especially if it has tall sides. The accommodation that we could make in this particular instance is to angle that box so that the individual could reach directly into it to perform the task. And with shoulders, we kind of have a better, worse, and try to avoid scenario here with the arms hanging as much as possible naturally at our side for shoulder muscles. That's where they'll be the most natural and relaxed. Of course, we have work to do, so that's not always going to be the case. But if we can keep them at or below shoulder level, then that will reduce the amount of strain that will be placed on the muscles that surround the shoulder joint and reduce the chance for repetitive strain injury. When we get to the lower back, there's another kind of easy red flag to look out for, particularly when lifting tasks or material handling tasks are being performed repetitively. And that's flexing forward at the waist. You see that individual bent forward at the waist to pick up an object, particularly from floor level, presents a huge risk for injury. 85% of all back injuries that occur in the workplace are tied to an incident where the worker or the individual was to some degree flexed forward when it occurred. So again, it's a real easy red flag. If we continuously, repetitively lift by bending forward at the waist, we're asking for trouble. The technique that's demonstrated on the right-hand side of the screen is with knees bent and the back as naturally upright as possible. It's impossible to keep our backs straight. That's not the way we're built. But if we bend elsewhere, particularly at the knees, when you have to pick up an object from floor level, that will reduce the chance for repetitive strain. One of the key concepts about ergonomics is that it's not usually a single event that triggers the injury. It may trigger the symptoms, but it doesn't truly cause the injury. They're generally known as either cumulative trauma disorders or repetitive strain injuries, and have become the most common type of injury occurring in the workplace. Again, not that single event like falling off a ladder or tripping over an extension cord, but damage that's done over an extended period of time that accumulates until symptoms are triggered. The bad part about that is that we can be performing tasks and actually making off-the-job lifestyle choices that can contribute to a long-term problem without realizing it. Just as with the lifting technique that was demonstrated, many of us could step away from our desks now, bend forward at the waist to pick up something off the floor, and we wouldn't feel any symptoms. But if we do that repetitively, we're doing damage that accumulates over time, so that long-term problem can be developing and we don't realize it. And we can even ignore some warning signs that can occur, like numbness or tingling, particularly with the upper extremities in the hands and wrists. The good news about the cumulative aspect is that by understanding some of these causes and making some changes, we can do things a little bit differently and reduce the chance for getting hurt. And that's the point. That's the main focus of ergonomics. And in our trainings, what we talk about is three main areas that we have control over, things that we can do to reduce the chance for this type of injury. And they involve paying attention to the best posture and body mechanics that the environment will allow. And we've talked a little bit about that already and demonstrated some very clear red flag positions that we want to try to avoid, and again, encourage folks to be in as much as possible a natural or neutral position. And that's ideal, and that's not always possible in the work world. So when the environment presents challenges, then we look for ways to change it. And that's the workstation design component of ergonomics that we'll spend a couple of minutes on as we move forward here. And lastly, we can help our bodies tolerate the tasks that we ask them to perform through exercise and conditioning. We're not all athletes, and levels of fitness and conditioning vary. That's part of the human condition. But we do have some control over what our level of tolerance for the tasks that we're asking our bodies to get involved in at work. And as we close this morning, we'll talk a little bit about what that might look like. But first, to look at the workplace or workstation design component, I have a couple of examples on the screen of workstations. The first is a very basic seated assembly type workstation, and you see several ergonomic components that are identified that make this an ergonomically friendlier design. And we begin with the lighting. You see that there is focused task lighting directly over the work surface. A poorly lit area can lead an individual to put themselves into kind of an awkward posture, not to mention the eye strain that can result. So a well-lit workstation is important, and task lighting can facilitate or support that. Moving over to the right, the tool, one of the tools that's being used by this individual has a couple of ergonomic features. The first is that it's hung by a balancer, which reduces the amount of force really by at least half, because to use this tool, they simply need to grasp it and place it before it's deployed, rather than pick it up and put it down each time. And you can also see that it's a straight-handled tool, a drill or a driver in this case, so that the wrist posture when grasping it, again, is natural or neutral. If this were a traditional L-shaped or 90-degree gun-style handle on the drill or driver, then if it were being applied to a horizontal work surface, as we have in the diagram here, then the employee would have to torque their wrist in a very awkward, deviated position to be able to use the tool. So that's got a couple of ergonomic features in the balancer and the design of the tool. And you see that the materials that this worker is accessing are within an easy reach, what's called a swing space. They're kind of radius that's directly in front of the individual so that they minimize any awkward reaching or bending or twisting. The surface, in this particular case, is adjustable in a couple of different directions. Height, which has a lot to do with the comfort level of the individual in all of the target areas that we discussed, upper extremities and back and neck. And also this particular table has a tilt feature so that the angle can be adjusted. It positions the worker more comfortably. And lastly, this is a seated workstation, and you can see that the chair, first of all, is an important safety feature. If it has wheels on it, it needs to have at least 5 points. But the main ergonomic feature is that it provides good support, particularly in the lower back or lumbar area for this individual. So a few components that can be built into the design of the workstation that will promote comfort, and a general approach to its design where there is a clear place for everything in its place with an easy reach or swing space. For administrative or computer workstations, there are also some basic components of an ergonomically friendly design. A bad example in the upper right-hand corner, and a diagram that looks a little bit friendlier in the lower left. We begin with the position of the monitor, and there are a couple of factors there. One is height, and we generally like to see the focal point, which is the top of the screen, not the monitor itself, but the top of the screen, at or slightly below eye level to minimize any bending of the neck and shoulder muscles. And we like to also have the unit, the monitor, placed directly in front of the individual rather than off in the corner, which would require twisting. The distance is sometimes prescribed by ergonomists. For me, that's more a matter of personal comfort, eyesight, lighting in the room, depending on how many little lines you have in your eyeglasses if you wear them and so forth. So that's more, I think, a matter of personal choice. But the key issues are height and placement directly in front of the individual. If transcription is a part of the tasks that the worker is performing, having a document holder is important. As you see in the diagram, this one is placed directly adjacent to the monitor, again, to minimize any bending or twisting. If it's close to the other focal point, that minimizes the range that's required. And if notes are on the desk, or worse yet on our lap, or even worse on the floor, then obviously there's a lot of awkward bending and twisting that would take place repetitively as the transcriptions perform. The next component is the placement of the keyboard, and height and distance are the critical features in that case. In terms of height, we like to see the keyboard such that when the worker is using it, there is about a 90-degree or L-shaped bend at the elbow, which you see is the case here, and distance is a factor in that as well. We also like to see the wrists supported so that natural or neutral posture can be maintained. In the case of the diagram here, this individual is gifted with good posture and they're in a natural or neutral position. Most of us will allow wrists to sag a little bit if there is no support for them when we're using a keyboard, so having an additional pad or support mechanism placed in front of the keyboard can be a positive ergonomic feature. Adjustability is key as well, and you can see in this case that the keyboard is placed on a tray that can be adjusted for both of those factors playing into the comfort level of the employee, both height and distance. And just as with the seated workstation in an industrial environment, the chair is very, very important. In this case, again, since it's on wheels, it has 5 points. The height of the chair is easier to demonstrate or to talk about in this diagram. We want to make sure that feet are placed comfortably and firmly on the floor or on another surface. If the height of the individual or the chair design presents a challenge for that, we can add a footstool. But we like to see the feet on the floor rather than tucked underneath. And again, about a 90-degree or L-shaped bend at the knee. And you can see that the seat pan is well-rounded and the cushion comfortable. We don't like to see the seat pan touching the back of the lower portion of the leg or the calf area, which can restrict circulation. And the other feature is the good support that this particular chair has with in the, again, the lower back or the lumbar area. With armrests, those can be an asset or a benefit to promoting comfort to employee. It can also be a hindrance. We need to be cautious about those. If the armrests are used and they are they're placed such that the employee has to extend their elbows out away from their body or alter that ideal 90-degree or L-shaped bend at the elbow that we're looking for, then they're actually presents a challenge rather than a benefit to the equation. So be cautious about armrests, and when they are adjustable, that makes it better for everyone. So that's a few features, basic features for workstation design in both a manufacturing and an administrative environment. Tool selection is also a component of promoting employee comfort, and there are a few examples on the screen here. Needle-nose pliers that are bent at the pincer, a paintbrush with a contoured handle to minimize that pinch grip that Kristen referred to earlier, self-opening scissors, which again reduces the amount of effort or force required by half, and we see a tool with an angled handle that's used for cutting on a horizontal surface so that the tool bends rather than the worker's wrist. So these are all what are referred to as control measures in ergonomics that reduce the impact of risk factors and promote employee comfort. There are some other strategies that we can deploy, such as reducing the number of repetitions through a strategy known as job rotation. If we have a work environment where there's a lot of fine motor skills being used for assembly tasks, and along that same or in that same work cell or area, gross motor skills being used for material handling. After a short period of time, those two employees could rotate, could switch tasks, and therefore use a broader variety of muscle groups. Training is key. We've talked about posture and body mechanics, and working with folks to, as much as possible, stay in that neutral zone is a huge part of an effective ergonomics program. We try to design workstations and select tools, as we've demonstrated here, to limit or at best avoid awkward postures. And lastly, bring in some exercise programs that can promote both strength and flexibility. When we talk about conditioning, as it relates to ergonomics, strength building exercises can be very helpful, but so can some simple stretches. And in fact, the flexibility benefit is perhaps even more important in an effective ergonomics program. So we encourage all employees to do what we can to get stronger and build endurance, but also to build flexibility. And there are some exercises that are demonstrated on the screen there, primarily for the core muscles of the abdomen and the lower back. There are very simple stretches for the upper extremities that can be done right at the workstation. A good approach to a stretching program is to take both the preparation and compensation approach, which means before beginning a task, we may want to stretch the muscles that are going to be used, especially if they're going to be used repetitively. But studies have shown more and more that there is as great a benefit, if not greater benefit, to stretching that's done after the exercise or after the task is performed. Those of you that have been in my sessions in person know that I'm a big believer in and advocate for exercise programs, particularly the simple ones that don't require gym memberships or fancy equipment and just take a few minutes, can be done right at the workstation and actually can greatly reduce the chance for these types of injuries. I have some contact information on the screen now, both for myself and for the Consultation Education and Training Division at MIOSHA. But that's the bulk of our presentation this morning. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I'm going to close the recording here and see if anybody has any questions or comments.